Hello and welcome to Really Help the Club and our In Conversation series. I'm Sarah Austin, and today I have got a really fascinating guest. This is Dr Mairi Macleod, who is the founder of Dating Evolved, and Mairi is a behavioural scientist and she's also a dating consultant for women who are over 50. And for the last 5 years, she's been running an online program to help women to find the right man for a happy, lasting relationship. And not only does she help other people, it's something that she's been through herself, and she found her own husband that way. And it's the program includes a science-based advice, practical experience, and one-to-one support. And she's got lots of success stories. So I can't wait to hear from Mairi, hear a little bit about her background, talk about how she helps different types of women, and we'll be able to pick her brains and get a few top tips from her. And I can see that she's joined the studio now, and the great just a second. So Mairi, there you are. Fantastic. You're in. Great. It's always one of those kind of like technical mysteries, as it were, like miracles. You never know how someone sort of finds their way on screen. Anyway, thank goodness you have. So welcome. I just give a little bit of background to your bio, but not very much. I don't want to steal any thunder at all. But Mairi, what I think is sort of interesting is just to hear a little bit about your background, what you used to do, what you do now, to hear your story. So could you just share a little bit about your background and who you are and where you come from?
Sure. Well, I'm in Edinburgh, and I started out a long time ago as a biologist studying animal behaviour. Sort of trogging around jungles in the remote parts of the world after monkeys and so on. But then in my early 30s, I got married, started having babies, but I hadn't chosen my first husband very well. Everything went tits up very quickly. And the marriage sort of stopped, and I had to give up on field work and stuff because obviously I couldn't, as a single parent of 3 tiny kids, I couldn't trog around the jungle anymore. So I took up journalism, science writing, writing about human behaviour, and I built up a huge body of knowledge around why we do what we do. And then in particular, I was concentrating on attraction and relationships and so on. And it's a bunch of knowledge that's really helped me in my own life, find a good guy in later life. So I'm really happy about that. And now I'm helping other women over 50 to do the same, to use a bit of science around how to actually find a good guy.
That's such a good story. It's what I love. I mean, I've done so many of these interviews, and I love it when it's someone's why is always so important, because of course it's usually given that they are very good at what they do. So it's obvious that that's why they should do what they do. But the real sort of passion, the motivation, I think is really interesting, and it's kind of taking the sciencey bit, the bit that you had spent years sort of learning and understanding, applying it to yourself. So you are the proof in the pudding, as it were, that your system, your thing works. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit more, because people will be, I think, really sort of intrigued by this. Is how can the approach that you apply, applying science to relationships, because intuitively you think, hang on a sec, a relationship is about a feeling, it's about an attraction, this sort of like the boom, the kind of that something goes spark within you. So how can you bring science into that? Because it seems sort of counterintuitive.
Yeah, well, as an evolutionary scientist, I look at why we've evolved to be the way we are. And when you think about attraction, it became clear to me that we tend to sort of follow our gut instincts when we're looking for a partner. We think, oh, wow, I fancy that guy, and there's a spark right away or whatever. But these instincts that we have, they evolved back in the Stone Age, when we needed different things from a relationship. So you might needed a big, strong, tough guy with high status and, competitive, to get the resources you needed to look after your kids and to protect you. But my contention is that now we need to kind of, consciously evolve our selection criteria and the way we go about relationships, to suit ourselves in the modern world and for the life stage we're at as well. It's obviously different
Yeah.
for older women. And, we tend to kind of always value the chemistry and the spark at the beginning. A lot of my clients come to me and, you know, I need somebody that I fancy right away, But actually, that's not really a great way to look at it. When I met my now husband, who I absolutely adore, I went about things in a very different way after learning all the science. And, when I first met him, we met actually at a singles event in a bar in Edinburgh. And I wouldn't say, it was fireworks right away the moment I met him. I could tell that he was a nice guy, but we got to know each other over the course of a few weeks because he came to some workshops I was running, and just got to know him better and better and realised he's a really great guy. And over time, the desire grew. That there's signs showing that, as we get to know someone, if we like them and we're compatible with them, we actually start to find them physically more attractive. So, the desire grows gradually. And that becomes something much more powerful than just fancying someone right away and then it all goes in a mess because they're not actually the right kind of person for you. It's important to find people with the right personality characteristics and someone who's going to have your back, basically.
So that's really
So,
interesting. So did he come to your workshop about how to find the right partner?
he did eventually. I'm not sure whether he was coming along because we'd met at the singles event. He might have been trying to get to know me better. I haven't actually had a straight answer about that.
I
but
love that.
but to be honest, we got to know each other over these classes, and then eventually he invited me along to a pub session where he was playing ukulele and singing. It was a group of ukulele players, and at that point, I didn't know if I fancied him or anything. I could tell he was a good guy, but it was when I heard him singing and sort of owning the place and showing his confidence that his attraction for me really came to the fore. And I always recommend to clients to sort of see, if they come across a good guy and they know he's a good guy, but they're not feeling it yet, see the guy in his confidence zone. What's he good at? What can he hold forth about? And also, if you can see other people being impressed with him, that can be a game changer. So if your guy, is an expert on a particular subject, he gives talks on, or whatever it is, music, then he can become a very attractive prospect for you when you see how impressive he is in that
So
context.
it's almost like a retraining of,
Mm.
your if I understand you correctly, in kind of intuitively, what's embedded in us is to be attracted physically to somebody, and actually that can really get in the way of what is going to be lasting and enduring, and what is perhaps good for us. A little bit like, sort of going back to the person you kind of take home and introduce to your parents is like, almost like could shock them. It is, what they would necessarily want for you or think is good for you, but actually what is good for you kind of endures over time. Is that sort of part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it?
I mean, yeah. It's just the fact that we tend to make mistakes in who
Mm.
we're initially attracted to. We might have a long list of requirements, things that we want in a relationship, but what research shows is when we actually get face to face with people, the people we choose are based on, completely different things. Usually we're attracted to people initially because of physical attraction and also personality.
Yeah.
Um, but then, other things become important at a later stage. But I think the main thing to look out for when you're picking a potential partner is, you know, do they have your needs at their heart? Are they looking out for you? Have they got your back? We have a sort of term in psychology, the welfare trade-off ratio. So you want your guy to have a high welfare trade-off ratio skewed in your favour. Um, I know, for instance, that my man would back me, whatever was happening in my life. I've had a few difficult experiences lately, and he was always there for me, supporting me and sort of taking up the slack. Um, I can tell you a story actually of a very good example of this with one of my clients, Rowan. Um, she met this lovely guy, and she's now in a great relationship. But right at the beginning, she broke her arm, and he was this like hotshot guy in a big legal firm, I think it was. Um, and she phoned him from A&E, and he dropped everything. He cleared his whole calendar for the day. Went to sit with her in A&E while she waited, and then he was up all night with her, and he was ferrying around and getting food for her and things. So he really put himself out. So the high welfare trade-off ratio means that they're willing to give up something of theirs for your benefit, to actually have a cost, and they're willing to endure for your benefit.
And it's really interesting that. And is that if it's kind of going into your sort of the science and your sort of knowledge of behaviour, is that because that was his natural, his instincts, his character, or was that because he was particularly connected to her, and was feeling? It's like, do you adapt and change
That's an
depending on?
interesting question. I would say it's a bit of both. It's probably a lot to do with his personality and his way of being. But obviously there was some compatibility there with Ruan. I mean, one thing to be conscious of, especially as we're getting a bit older, compatibility becomes even more important for us in terms of our attraction to someone and their attraction to us. So there's different components of attraction. There's the kind of immediate, what we call mate value, and that tends to be, things that everyone can agree on about somebody's attractiveness, and it tends to come down to physical attractiveness and the sort of immediate kind of features that come out. But I suppose, sadly, when we're getting older, as women particularly, we're a bit of a disadvantage with the immediate mate value. But compatibility actually becomes more important in attractiveness as you get to know somebody. So it's a good idea for us at this time of life to prioritize compatibility. So that means getting to know people over a bit of time, and to give them a chance to get to know us and vice versa. And then if we are right for each other, if there's resonating between us and we get on, then we can become uniquely attractive to each other, and that's a great thing, and that's how you fall in love, basically.
Yeah.
But if you're just relying on that immediate mate value, it's not so great. And one problem is actually online dating obviously completely prioritizes the immediate sort of appearance, photos. It's drastic and it's a shame. But I would definitely recommend everybody does online dating, because especially at our age, perhaps it's the most efficient way of coming into contact with lots of potential partners to assess. But I think you've got to be really careful about how you do it. And because of this, prioritizing compatibility issue, I think that the way to do that is to get lots of specific stuff into your profile. None of that kind of generic stuff. I like traveling and I like going to films and concerts and stuff. Everybody likes these things. It's about describing specific things that you're really into that might be different from everybody else, or how do you feel about an experience you've had, and that can resonate with the right kind of guy. He'll notice that. It'll make you, stand out for the right kind of person for you. So, if you have some odd quirky hobbies, or you're a sports fanatic, or you're a dog lover, or you're an astrophysicist, get it in there and tell them how you feel about it. And it will put some people off, and that's a good thing, because they're not the right people for you. But for the people that it is right for, it'll be really good. I mean, what I do with with my clients is I review their profiles to make sure that they've got enough specific things in there, and that it's going to be compelling for the right kind of guy. And one of the ones that I did recently was it was a lady, Fiona, and she she loves France and she's got a property in France, but she hadn't been really making that much out of it in her profile. And I got her to describe some of the things she really loved and about France. And then she got messaged by this guy in Edinburgh. She lives here as well. Um, he's into French stuff just as much as she is, and actually has a property in France 40 minutes away from her property in France. So now they're together having a great time and spending their summers in, summer holidays in France together and having a great time. So it does really work to, have those specifics in your profile if you're wanting to do online dating.
So get specific, be
Yeah.
real, be authentic.
Yeah, and
And
put off the wrong people as well.
yeah, I like that. Put off the wrong people. And
Yeah.
so now you particularly focus on women over 50. Why do you do that, Mairi?
Well, I would say that, we do have different challenges from younger women. We also have some advantages as well, actually. So we don't have a biological clock ticking. Either we've had kids or we haven't, but we're not going to give birth anytime soon. So we're not in a rush for finding the one to settle down and have babies with. If that's a lot of younger women might be doing that. We also tend to be financially independent, and that gives us a lot of freedom. We're not going to get into a relationship where we're depending on a guy in that way, and so we can take it or leave it. If it doesn't work for us, we can get out of it and move on and find something better. Another thing that comes up actually from the hormone science is that our hormones, there's some evidence that our hormones might be starting to work in our favour in terms of choosing the right guy, because what scientists have found is that women post-menopause or perimenopausal, they tend to have a higher preference for nice guys, slightly less testosterone driven guys, which might mean that we're able to pick more companionable mates because, for younger women, there's often the sort of impetus to go for the bad boy types. And I think that starts to wane a bit. There'll be variation, obviously, and some women will still do that. But, there's more chance of finding the right kind of person. But yeah, it's different for women over 50. We're looking for different things, and I'm in that age bracket, and that's where my experience lies. And I met my second husband at the age of 50. We got married when I was 53, so I've been there, and I can talk to the issues that older women have.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think people, who are either watching it now, and by the way, if you are, do pop any questions, any comments, any observations, because I think it's such an interesting area here as well. And again, for sort of women in midlife, I think the whole concept of going online, joining apps and things, and as you say, because so much of it is about how you look, that immediate, swiping process is, I think, pretty daunting. And so if people do have questions, pop them in here, and and again, when we share it afterwards, if you've got any comments, I think it's a really interesting area. And so we could talk about lots, Mairi, but what do you teach women? What are kind of some of the initial things that someone was coming onto your program? What are kind of some of those initial steps? And are there any sort of immediate tips that you could share with anyone watching right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, there's tons of stuff, obviously, but I would say I would start by talking about getting into the right mindset, a positive mindset around dating. A lot of women I come across, they're so negative about dating. There's no decent men out there. They're all players or crap or whatever. And it's easy to feel like that, but that's partly because the ones that get in your face are of that variety, and the good guys tend to kind of stay a bit more hidden because they're more respectful and considerate, so they don't get in your face so much. But there are good guys out there, and it's really important to sort of approach the whole enterprise with sort of positivity and friendliness, and then use objective criteria to weed out the duds, basically. Another really important thing to get onto straight away is being proactive. what I find with my clients is the ones that sort of really go for it, they put lots of energy in and time. I mean, anything worthwhile is going to take time and energy, unfortunately. The ones who are the most proactive and get themselves out there, they have the best success. And also be willing to make the first move. I think women, especially maybe of our generation, are used to thinking, oh no, the guys have to sort of, I'm not interested in a guy who doesn't have the balls to approach me or whatever. But actually, nowadays, the culture has changed a bit. Some of the nice guys will be hanging back because, they might have taken on board the whole, Me Too message, around consent and everything. And they don't want to get in your face. And also, in an real life situation, it's terrifying for a guy to walk up to a woman if he's in a group of women and then sort of try to make contact. So I would say, don't be afraid to make the first move. Get into the habit of talking to men when you're out and about. Sometimes be on your own. Don't always be in a group because it's hard to kind of talk to other people if you're always in a group. I got an email just the other day from an ex-client who he was sort of talking about how she'd taken on board my advice about this, and she had been in a cafe with a couple of her friends, and she noticed that there was just on the next table there was a nice looking guy there who looked very sort of nice and friendly, and she sort of caught his eye, and she was sort of remembering the advice, and she couldn't resist sort of making a comment on the cake he was eating or something, and got a little bit of banter going. Then when her two friends got up to leave, she thought, right, I'm going to stay here, and she actually asked if she could join him at his table, and they got chatting. Yeah, they got chatting away, and everything was great. And now they're an item, and he's a brilliant guy.
So she had done your program.
Yeah.
So she had the armory, she had the toolkit, and knew what to do. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting that, because I think sort of it kind of feeds onto the whole confidence thing, which again I think there are sort of like two parts to it. One is kind of that there is a confidence that comes from maturity. You know what you want. You probably know what you don't want, because inevitably we'd have had experiences, good and bad, and this is why this is where you're at, as it were. But the other thing is that whole kind of confidence that can ebb away because you are older. You can send how you look. You can send, you don't necessarily have the same looks or body that you had, sort of, earlier in life and things. Is, how do you help women navigate that kind of confidence journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, we talk about the compatibility issue, which becomes much more important when you actually get to know somebody. So it's about prioritizing that. But it's also about understanding that everyone wants different things. It's something that gets lost in the media because, the media is constantly portraying, young, skinny women as being the ideal, and they're the people that have got it all together. But when you actually look at what people desire and want to find in for someone in a relationship, there's massive variety, and what men are attracted to, varies hugely. I mean, just to take one example, body size and shape. There's plenty of guys that prefer women at the bigger end of the spectrum, as well as guys who prefer skinnier women. It varies hugely, and depends on a whole pile of different things. And also, if we're thinking about age, yes, there will be older guys of our sort of age that will be thinking that they should go for a young Dolly Bird type, but probably the ones you'd be more interested in are the ones that actually want someone compatible, that they get along with, and that they've got more in common with, and they are out there. I would say, the majority of older men will recognise that they'd be better off with someone, that's not too far away in age from them. And, my clients have, many of them have met lovely partners, some of them younger than them, of course, so you don't have to go for someone the same age or older, which is a misconception. My husband's a lot younger than I am, and this happens to quite a few people, and I think it's something that is worth bearing in mind, that you don't have to just go for your own age or older. You can go for younger guys as well. And there's plenty of instances where younger guys are very happy to find a nice older woman to be with.
Well, I
It's
suppose
fine.
it comes back to what you were saying earlier, is overcoming some of these natural internal biases that you have. So
Mm.
you go online and you think, this is the criteria and that's the criteria, and I sort of think I know what I want, but I think I know what I don't want. When in fact you need to be a bit more open-minded towards it in terms of being open to finding that compatibility. And so what are the traits, again, when you're taking women through your programs, what are some of the traits that you say we should be looking for?
Well, I think that the fundamental ones are what I was mentioning earlier about sort of being there for you. People that, someone that's
Mm-hmm.
reliable, isn't going to let you down, isn't going to mess around. Um, I mean, one of the exercises I do with my clients is look at wants versus needs for a potential partner. So wants would be things that would be nice to have, but you can compromise on them.
Mm-hmm.
So in there, I would put maybe physical characteristics or hobbies that they have that you want to align with yours. But in the needs, the things that you really need for a good long-term relationship that are deal breakers. So these would be things like share your deeply held values. Um, if you want to spend the rest of your life traveling the globe, you don't really want to end up with somebody that wants to stay home and tend the garden. That's going to make you miserable. Or, if you are a very touchy-feely person, you probably don't want to be with somebody avoidant who keeps you at arm's length constantly.
Mm-hmm.
um, but so it's important to realise that there are things that you could compromise on to widen your pool of potentials, but you want to stick with the things that are really essential. I mean, to give you an example, I had a client, Jane. She came to me and she had, up until that point, she had always thought she really needed to have a tall guy because she's 5'10" and she likes to wear heels, and she wanted to have someone that was taller than her. And she also wanted
So
to
he
have
must be
someone
tall.
yeah, he must be tall. And she's really into skiing. So she wanted to have someone who's into skiing. She thought those are things that I need. And that all that had happened when she took that approach was she ended up with narcissists who skied. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that didn't really work for her, unfortunately. Well, not surprisingly. But then she sort of reassessed her wants and needs when she came and did the program. And then she met this guy who is absolutely lovely. She absolutely adores him. He's shorter than her. He doesn't do any sports, but she's totally happy with that. She can go skiing with somebody else. And um, he makes her feel like a queen. And when they go out, she still wears her heels, and she says he makes her feel like a supermodel. And
Wow,
she's she,
amazing.
she's blissfully happy, and they're living together down in the Cornish coast now. So it all worked out
Um,
really well.
so let's talk a bit about online dating versus kind of in real life, as it were. And I think that, nowadays, some younger generation, they've kind of grown up online, grown up with social media. They are much more comfortable that this is a way that you meet people, and this is sort of one of his natural filters. But again, I can see, with people in their sort of midlife, is we've gone from a sort of analog to the digital generation, and the old-fashioned thing is you meet someone through someone that introduces you or through your network or something, and what we know is actually that is it's a really hard way to do it, and that kind of pool of people just never seems to be sort of big enough, or there's just not enough people out there to be able to do that. So you think, okay, online is the way to go, but there's bound to be a sort of natural fear of, am I going to meet someone who's real? Is this actually quite a dangerous thing to do? And so I think sort of naturally people, and especially women, worry about some of the risks of going online. What do you say to people about that?
Well, I mean, I would say definitely do online dating. I recommend a double-pronged approach. Get
Mm-hmm.
out in real life as well, because if you, join clubs and classes and go to events and so on, you may well meet the love of your life. It's quite possible. Obviously, you need to be open to it and be willing to chat with people, and that's something that we go through quite a lot in the program. Where I'm sort of teaching women about how to make contact and connect with guys out there. But yeah, I would definitely do online dating as well, simply because of the numbers that you can come into contact with. And it's certainly difficult, and there's lots of not nice guys out there, shall we say, but there are some good ones as well. And in terms of safety, I mean, we talk about, a lot around avoiding scammers and so on. I mean, I suppose the main piece of advice is, if it seems too good to be true, have your antennae sort of on high alert. Scammers will tend to, they're trying to get into your good books. They're trying to earn your trust and build up a relationship with you. So if you get approached by someone, super duper gorgeous that, you're quite surprised by, or they're using, language that you wouldn't normally kind of, that doesn't kind of feel quite right. They might even be using AI, for example, or they might be abroad and, English isn't their first language. Quite often what these guys will do is they'll use fake photos. So you could use Google Lens was it Google Lens or Google ID to kind of do a reverse search on the image to see whether it's actually a real person or whether it's maybe a celebrity or a stock photo or whatever. But the other things to look out for are, do they make it seem as if they're unavailable to meet up with? So, are they working abroad? A totally cliched one is they're working for Médecins Sans Frontières as a cardiac surgeon. One of my clients actually got that exact one, and eventually she got taken in for a little while, and eventually she rang up Médecins Sans Frontières or emailed them, and they actually have a whole sort of section within their charity to deal with all this sort of scamming stuff that people do to actually try and romance scams and so on. But anyway, what will happen is they will try to build up a level of trust with you. They'll maybe mirror things that are going on in your life to sort of gain your trust, and then they'll hit you with something like, oh, my mum needs this operation, but I can't get hold of my bank account at the moment. Would you be able to just lend me something? Just so that they've got your trust, and then they'll, try and get money out of you.
So it's usually about money rather than anything else. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, there are lots of things you can do. I mean, some of the dating sites have ID verification, which is very helpful. So that can make you feel pretty confident that they are who they say they are. But what I would do if I were online dating is, once you get to sort of 4 or 5 messages back and forth, I would be suggesting getting onto a video call. Then you can, that's good anyway, whether they were scammers or not, because you want to start getting to know someone properly. But if they're not willing to come onto a video call, or if for some reason their video's not working or whatever, then be very, very suspicious, because, there's no reason why, people can't come on a video call. But that will allow you to actually check that they are who they say they are, and speak to them in real time. So that would be the sort of main bit of advice to avoid any sort of bad nonsense. And it's also a good way of moving forwards sort of reasonably quickly. You don't want to be in a situation where you're messaging for weeks on end, because it might come to nothing, and then you've just wasted a load of time, and you might be building up an idea of this person in your head that just isn't reality. So best to get onto at least a video call, and then meet up in real life if you want to take things further.
So lots of tips. I mean, really interesting, and a kind of, I suppose, how to avoid scam, how to avoid time wasting, and how to be as sort of as efficient and productive as you can, so that your shortlist, as it were, or the filter means that this is worth doing. And I think a really sort of interesting kind of first step Well, one of the things I think that sort of comes out in our community, which comes out over and over again, is there's just no good guys out there, and are there decent older men out there as well? And or as you said, sometimes if they're just looking for younger women. So how do we find them?
Well, certainly if it's online, I think it's about taking that proactive approach. Don't just wait for the matches to come to you. Don't just wait for men to message you. Go and hunt through the profiles of men, and you need to pick an app that will allow you to do that. Hunt through the profiles yourself, read the profiles, and then if they appeal to you in terms of what they're saying, get messaging and pick up on something specific in their profile to talk to them about, so that you can actually get into a proper connecting kind of conversation rather than just hi there, how are you doing sort of thing. And we're all bored with that for sure. In terms of meeting people out and about, I would get into the habit of talking to people wherever you go, so that it becomes second nature. It will make your life nicer anyway, and you'll get used to it, and you'll realise that actually people do enjoy talking back to you, and it's fine. There's a bit of a kind of misconception that people don't want us to disturb them, but most people actually like it if you're friendly and chat with them. And be approachable to the nice guys, because as I was saying earlier, the good guys might not be as prone to approaching you as someone who's very well practiced with women and is a player and so on. So in order to be approachable, don't always be in a huddle of other women. Be on your own sometimes. If there's somebody you've got your eye on that you would like to talk to, when they go up to the bar, go and stand next to them, or grab the next table to them, or make contact, make eye contact and smile. There's nothing as inviting as a smile. And then the guys who are good guys and maybe a bit more respectful will feel that it's okay to come and talk to you.
So have faith. Have faith. Be
Absolutely,
sensible,
have faith.
but have faith. So I guess there's so much. I remember when I first came across you, Mary, I thought, God, this is such an interesting topic. Regardless, I think of where you are in your relationship status, it's just really interesting how things have changed, how attitudes have changed as well. And I guess it's that sort of sense of self-awareness as well, which is is just so interesting. So of course you do your online webinars and your programs, etc. And we're doing stuff with you as well. But do you have a last top tip for anyone who's looking at this going, okay, where shall I start? Should I go paid, unpaid on the apps? What would be your kind of like your number one thing to take away from today?
Okay, I think it's a sort of quite a general thing. Don't strive to be attractive to as many men as possible. You don't want many men, you want one man probably. Probably.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
maybe some women might want more than one. But and you don't need to sort of use tactics to get people to fall in love with you. You can't change a guy's personality or openness to a relationship. But what I think is important is identifying guys with the right qualities, and we've been through a bit of that already. And when you meet a guy, instead of asking yourself, how can I be attracted to this guy? Ask yourself, has this man got what it takes to have a good relationship with me? Sort of turn it around and actually ask yourself, has he got the capacity for a good relationship? And I think that is, heading well in the right direction for finding a good relationship. So
I think that's very good advice. Do you want to just briefly touch upon how someone might want to get in touch with you? What happens in your programs, and just briefly to explain.
Sure. Well, I run a Dating Evolved group program, and it involves an online course to give you all the advice around how to find your right guy, all the practicalities around online dating, meeting guys in real life, how to sort your confidence out, all the different aspects that you need to know about. And then we have group calls, 4 group calls every month, so that women can come together and chat about how they're getting on. And I find that that is a real game changer for people, just having others to talk about and realise, yeah, other people are having the same issues as me, and here's somebody that overcame it doing this, and let's try that. And it really helps, women keep going, and until they actually get to the stage where they find the right guy for them. Sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it even takes a couple of years, but quite often it will take, far, far less than that. And they're a lovely, lovely sort of supportive bunch of women. I really enjoy having the calls and things. It's really nice. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me or learn more about this, just go to my website. It's called datingevolved.com. And I have, free online events. I have a blog with lots of advice in it. And I also send out a weekly dating advice newsletter, so you can sign up for that if you like. And I'd love to have you in the gang. So just come along to the website.
Mairi, thank you very much for joining us today, and it's been, really fascinating. And I know that we will meet again to carry on the conversation again, in another live, because there's so much to be able to share, and you can see that this is such an interesting and I think sort of compelling area to talk about. But thank you very much for sharing your kind of, I guess, positive approach to to how you can go about this and feel more confident and feel inspired to just get out there and find out more. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
It's been lovely to speak to you.
You too.
Cheers.